All right, guys, good morning. This is our annual Pest ID training. All employees engaging in pest control have to have an ID card with a picture. And each year you have to have 2 hours of continuing education. We usually do 3 or 4, I don't know. But this is all about safety, right? We want to protect ourselves because we're using chemicals. We want to protect others. We want to protect the environment, other animals, right? All new employees, before you get a card, you have to have 5 hours of field training. So if you're new, we've got to get you in the field, and basically someone just has to hold your hand and make sure you understand how to do things in the field, okay? And we have a sheet for that. But everybody else, most everybody here already has a card, so all we're doing is renewing it. All right? Now remember, the label is the law, okay? So whatever it says on the chemical label, and it doesn't matter if it's pesticides, it could be bleach, it can be any kind of chemical in your home. You should read it, okay? Don't be stupid and think that you know more than that chemical, okay? A lot of people, they just take things out and they use them. If you don't protect yourself, you can get harmed, okay? Or harm others. So there's, the first thing you want to cue in on is the call sign on the label, signal sign, okay? Each chemical is going to have a call sign. I don't know if you could see that, but it says warning. See that? So caution, warning, or danger. That's the first thing right on the front. The good news is most of the chemicals we use have caution, which is the least harmful. But all chemicals are harmful, so you have to be careful, okay? Somewhere on here, on this label, if you were to read it, it has personal protection equipment. You need to follow it. Go ahead and scroll down. All right, right there. You went too far. Go back up. Right there. So the signal word, that's the first thing you cue on. How dangerous is this chemical? Okay? And it doesn't matter, like I said, in your house. A lot of people don't realize how dangerous bleach is. They get the sponge out, and they're going to go clean the bathroom and get all that mold out, and they don't put any gloves on, they don't make sure that area is ventilated, and the next thing they know, they don't feel too good. Or even worse than that, it might be a chronic harm where they don't even know they've harmed themselves until years later. And that's what we're trying to avoid here, okay? We don't want to harm you. We want to make a living. We all want to go home to our families and be safe. A lot of the problems with chemicals are because people do not pay attention to the personal protection equipment they need to have on and the environment, what's going on, okay? So caution is the least toxic. But what can happen is your skin is like a sponge. Remember that. Your eyes, your mouth, your genitals, under your arms, those are very susceptible areas, okay? So normally the minimum protection equipment we're going to use, right? Safety glasses, earplugs, long sleeve shirt, long pants, shoes and socks. The other thing is, when you're spraying or treating with chemicals, you should have loose garb. And the reason why you want loose garb is if there is a gust of wind or you do spill it on you, it's less likely to go through the garment and touch your skin. Remember, your skin is like a sponge. It will absorb, okay? Before you treat anything, you should look at the weather. Is it going to rain later? Now, we deal with summer rains down here because we're in a subtropical environment, right? So most of the time, there's imminent rain, or at least there's a storm going to come by. So we have to pay attention. Is a storm coming? Should we apply? And it's tough during the summer, okay? But the other thing is wind. Sometimes you can't spray because it's just too windy. And what's going to happen is it's going to get on you or something that you don't want it to get on. It could even endanger people, right? Or dogs, or whatever. If you see someone coming by and they're in the spray area, in the area you're treating, you need to stop immediately and ask them to please leave, okay? And sometimes other humans can be a pain in the butt. Always err on the side of caution. You could ask someone 3 times and they just are arrogant and they don't move, right? They think that, they don't have to listen. So you be the smart one and just don't spray. Come back to that area or just pack it up, whatever. The bottom line is always think safety first for you and for others. If we do this, we'll avoid problems, okay? Now that ID card has to be on you at all times, okay? As long as you're following the label, the law, and as long as you have your personal protection equipment, and as long as you have your card, no one can do anything to you, okay? If you don't follow the law, you're going to get a ticket. You might get lucky and get a warning, but you could get a ticket up to $10,000. Okay? And I'm not paying it. You get it? So I'm giving you all the tools you need to be safe. If you don't have something, all you have to do is ask, and I will get it for you because it's that important. I not only care about you, we're doing this for our families to earn a living, okay? I want you to go home and enjoy your life, but from a business perspective, I can't allow you to do it because I could be sued. So it's a benefit both ways, right? So please take this seriously. Like I said, most of the accidents and lawsuits that you see today are because people aren't taking the use of chemicals seriously, all right? So if it's windy, don't treat. If it's too hot, if it's above 85, you gotta look at the label because some chemicals are phytotoxic. Phytotoxic means that on extreme temperatures, either below 50 or above 85, they don't work the same, okay? They can cause toxicity, right? That's what it's all about. How much of this chemical can I put down before it's toxic? And they actually do studies, and they give it what they call an LD number, right? It's basically how much of this can I use before it becomes toxic? To animals, to you, right? So you got to be careful in extreme temperatures because that chemical changes and it doesn't act the same. all right? So definitely, especially herbicides, right? Herbicides are very phytotoxic, excuse me. And so what happens when it gets extreme, they can actually work a little better actually and kill things. So you got to be very, very careful with chemicals. And that's true of paint even, right? If it's below 50 degrees, if you look on the label, it says, it'll tell you don't paint, because the paint won't work, it won't adhere. So all chemicals are kind of the same, so you have to read that label. All right. Plant health care. This is kind of an emerging thought. You would think it would have been universal for a long, long time, but it hasn't. Some people have had this thought for a long time, but it's starting to catch on. You're starting to see it. And the whole thought is, let's take a holistic approach towards life. Okay? What I mean by that is, we want to protect all living things. We want to protect the environment. We want to protect the water and the air that we breathe, right? You know about global warming and all the pollution in the water. Well, all that's slowly changing. You're starting to see more and more chemicals developed, and they spend billions of dollars to bring a chemical to market now in the US. And the reason why is they have to prove to the EPA, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that chemical will not stay persistent and get into the water supply. All the older chemicals, they worked really well at killing things, but they were persistent in the soil. They stayed around for a long, long time. They got into our drinking water, and they got people sick. They killed animals. DDT, anybody ever hear of DDT? Ever heard that? So they used to spray DDT back in the day. What happened was it would thin the shell of eggs of birds, and they didn't know it, but they were thinning it so much the UV ray from the sun was killing the birds, and so we almost wiped out all the eagles and all the prey birds. They were like, what's going on? Why are all the birds going away? What was us? So they had to stop that chemical from being used, and then slowly, over a long period of time, right now you finally see ospreys and eagles again. The birds are finally coming back. So they're very, very careful with chemicals now. They don't, that's good for us. They don't allow them on the market if they're persistent anymore. They're taking them off. The problem with us, they don't work as well. They're not as good at what we needed them to do. Because most of the time, right, we have an infestation of chinch bugs. We have an infestation of mealybugs, and we want to kill them because the customer doesn't want their plants sickly looking, right? They want them healthy, and they want them flourishing, they want blooms, they want everything looking like heaven. It's very difficult to do because now these chemicals are hard, don't work as well, and we as applicators have to know this and come up with ways to make it work. All right? Go ahead, come up a little bit. So we practice integrated pest management. Back in the day, if you saw you had chinch bugs, you would just get a chemical and put it everywhere. Every single solitary piece of grass got some kind of bug killer, insect killer, right? So you blanket it. Well, now we don't do that. Now we monitor and we scout. So every time we go to the property, when we're trimming or cutting, you got to ask yourself, man, this grass doesn't look as good as it did last week. What's wrong? Right? That's what should start it. Man, those hibiscus are starting to look, something's not right with them. So you ask a question. The first thing you do is you go and you monitor and you scout. So you're looking, what's going on? Was it just because the sprinkler system broke? Has it been dry? Or do you get down and you start looking to see if you can find any insects, right? So it starts with your eyes. Look around. Most bugs or insects are underneath. They hide from the sun. So if you see yellowing or you see something that doesn't look quite right, start investigating and see what you can find. Once you see that animal, you need to identify what is it. So that's the next thing. Identify what the pest is. If you're not sure, take a picture of it, call me, you can send it to Donald, you can send it to Nick. And if I don't know, I'll get online and find out. Sometimes you get new insects that you don't. We had one years ago called a Sri Lankan weevil. Never seen it before. Out of the blue, a customer called and said, I got these whitish gray bugs everywhere. And I'm like, okay, I'll come down. Come down, they're all over the plants. I'm like, man, I've never seen that ever. So I had to take a sample down to the extension service, and the guy said, oh yeah, this is coming into the area. It started in Brevard County in the early 2000s, and it's migrating all over the state. And the problem with it is, it eats 100 different plants. You can see it on Indian hawthorn like crazy now. If you guys know Indian hawthorn? If you look at the leaves, you'll see them. They look like someone's been chomping on them and eating them. It's from that Sri Lankan weevil. Sometimes you don't even see them, they're hiding. So you want to identify the pest, and then you want to follow the control action guidelines. So basically, if it's a big grasshopper and you only see 2, you know the grasshopper is going to eat and do damage, but maybe the best thing to do is just kill it with your hand, or pruner or something, you know what I mean? Squash them, whatever. I know it's kind of gross, but the simple fact of the matter is, why would you break out chemicals if it's a small population? You see what I'm saying? Most of the time in our business, though, we're going to probably choose a chemical, okay, to do the job. We always want to choose a chemical that is selective. We don't want a broad spectrum, right? We don't, remember what I said about the insect killer? Now if there's chinch bugs, we used to just put bug killer everywhere. Now we don't do that. Now we identify, okay, here's the patch. It may be a 10 by 10 patch, so we're going to encapsulate that patch and maybe do 20 by 20 just to make sure there's some we didn't miss, right? And we're going to do that area, but we're not going to do it everywhere. And the reason why is that holistic approach, right? Plant healthcare. There are actually beneficial insects and beneficial animals in the soil. Not everything's bad, even in us. When we had antibiotics right back in the day, everybody thought bacteria is bad. So they came up with antibiotics, and everybody went, oh my Lord, Nobel Prize winner, this guy has saved us. Bacteria is so bad, right? Everybody's got it in their head. What about a virus? Anybody know about a COVID-19 virus? Same thing. Everybody thinks viruses are bad. Well, guess what? Most bacteria and most viruses actually help us. They're actually beneficial. Most funguses, right? Anybody got any funguses? Yeah, they can become a problem and they're parasitic. and they can infect us. Those are the bad ones. We need to stop those, right? But most of them are actually good. And so the thought is, let's not kill everything, because some of those beneficial insects are actually help keep the population of the bad ones down. Okay? What happened when we killed all the coyotes and all the wolves and all the top-tier predators? Right? Because of the farms, right? If the wolves, the coyotes, and the big cats, what were they doing to the farm animals? They were coming in and killing a cow. Cow was worth $600, $700, $800, right? That little baby. And so the farmers said, we're going to kill all these, right? Damn things, right? What happened? Now we have overpopulation of other things. Deer used to be kept in check by those top-tier predators. There's some areas up north that are so overridden by deer, they're like roaches. Here. They're a problem. They're everywhere. You see, we threw the balance off. Those predators is what kept the balance with all the other animals. Well, it's the same thing with insecticides. We have to be very, very careful, okay? We want to get rid of the mealybugs, get rid of the aphids, get rid of the chinch bugs, get rid of the fungus. But we want to do it in such a way where we can maybe select the best chemical for that, where we don't damage everything else, to keep the balance, right? Not kill everything. Because what happens is, once you kill all those predators too, they found that some of the bugs, when you spray, are resistant. You don't kill them. Now guess what's breeding? The ones that were resistant are breeding. So slowly but surely, you've used that chemical, they're breeding their way out of it, and you can't use that chemical anymore. Okay? You see what I'm saying? So now you got a problem. And that's exactly what's happening with antibiotics with us. We overused them so much, we're becoming resistant to them. So we can't use them anymore. And they're afraid that someday those antibiotics that we still have to use for operations and so forth can be a problem, because we won't have them and we'll need them. And they think that now we might have a problem with it. I was just talking to Stephen about MRSA. MRSA is a bad one that's found in hospitals, and they can't get rid of it because there's no antibiotics now. They're resistant to it. And it makes you very, very sick. Go up a little bit. So the next thing is, usually if we see chinch bugs or something like that, we don't wait. But technically, if we knew we had an intelligent customer, and they might say to us, you know, I really don't like you using chemicals. Isn't there an alternative? And sometimes there is, right? A natural chemical, biological chemical, but not always. But you could say to them, look, we use integrated pest management. We use the minimum amount we can use to get the job done. And we also don't treat unless we see how many are in the area. If there's only a couple, we know they're not going to do damage. We don't spray yet, right? We don't treat until we know it's reached the threshold where it's going to do damage, right? And then the timing. When's the best time to kill bugs, Francisco?
They're babies.
When they're babies, right? Think about a newborn baby. It's not going to live if it doesn't have its mom and its dad, or at least its mom, right, or its dad, to take care of it, because it's not going to be able to take care of itself. Well, it's the same thing with a baby plant, a baby weed, the fungus when it just starts, right? The animal, when it's just born, that's when it's the most susceptible. So that's why it's important, every time you go to an account, to monitor and scout, especially the supervisors, right? You should always check your properties every time you come. Now, if it's a small thing, you could probably take care of it yourself, or at least make sure you put on your report so I can tell Donald. Right? Same thing with the irrigation. If the irrigation's not working and there's a problem, hopefully you got a little care kit. If it's just one head, fix it. Right, Mario? If it's just one head, fix it. If it's a little area on one hibiscus, it's got mealybugs, spray it. We don't want, Donald's got his hands full doing the bulk of the work. If it's tiny, we don't need to waste his time driving all the way out there for one head or one bush. He's trying to do the big stuff. Steve's trying to do the big stuff. So you just help out while you're there. Saves us money. We don't have to drive a truck all the way out there. Get it? It's a good way to save money. You should have a few chemicals on the truck that you can take care of small problems, and a few irrigation parts that you can fix a head or a pipe. If it ends up being something big, we flag it, and you can call me and say, hey, we got a broken head, or hey, we got a problem, man, there's fungus everywhere, right? Okay. Stop. Too far. Go back up. You gotta go to the arrow. Right there. All right. If you treat without monitoring and scouting and identifying the insect, the fungus, it's malpractice. Okay? It's the same thing as a doctor. If you came in and said, doctor, I really need some codeine or whatever drug, right? And he doesn't even check you. He just says, here you go. That's malpractice, right? And they shut those doctors down. Well, it's the same thing with us. We need to make sure that we are actually going through the steps, identifying the bug, insect, bacteria, virus, whatever it is. So we've got different chemicals. We've got the biological pesticides. We've got biorational pesticides. We've got botanicals. They actually have some plants, right? Everybody hear of a neem tree? Or how about a chrysanthemum? You guys know what chrysanthemums are? Well, a lot of plants have what they call allelopathy. And they actually develop chemicals to release. And those chemicals can actually stop bugs or insects from eating them. Or they can actually make the ground unbeneficial to certain plants, so other plants can't grow near them. Okay? It's pretty cool. They've actually got defense mechanisms that they've developed and they can release to ward off the bugs from eating them. A neem tree you can actually use. It's a natural botanical to treat fungus and insects. It's pretty cool. Okay? So it's really cool how scientists figure that kind of stuff out. And then they develop chemicals on it. Okay? So we want to try the best option possible, and there's a lot of different choices, and there's a lot of mode of action. Go ahead. All right. So there's some strategies we can use. We know every year during the winter we're going to start seeing brown patch, right? We're doing that now, right? Donald's treating for a lot of brown patch. So we can make a calendar. It's called a phenology calendar. It's pretty cool. We know in this region 9B, when the summer starts, we're going to see a huge explosion of bugs, right? Why? Circle of life. As soon as the first rains come, it's warm, everything wants to reproduce. What do birds eat? Bugs. So the bugs got to be there, they're not. What do frogs eat? When you have a rain, if you live near water, what do you hear? Croaking. Why? Because they're happy, man. They're going to reproduce, right? They're going to find a mate, and there's plenty of food. Okay? So everything kind of goes together, circle of life, right? So we can make a calendar called a phenology calendar to say, okay, let's start looking right now for this, because it's this time of year. If we're going to have a grub problem, when are we going to have it, Francisco? Francisco, when are we going to have a grub problem if we're going to have it? Usually July, August, September. Okay? Okay? So what happens is the rains a lot, and it brings them up to the top, and they start eating. When do they start eating? July, August, or September, usually. That's just a rule of thumb, but we know we can make that on a calendar. I've been here so long doing this, I know to remind you guys, start looking for grubs. What happens with grubs? Grubs are one of the worst to the turf, right? Grubs get into that root layer and they eat all the roots off. And you can see it because the grass looks like it's dying. If you go and grab that grass, turf, you can pull it right up like it's a new piece of sod. And normally under there, what do you got? Grubs everywhere. Now luckily, we have not seen a big infestation lately. I've noticed since we've been using imidacloprid, bandit, right? Imidacloprid, I haven't seen it as much. And that also, I think when we started blanketing everything back in the day, we were killing some beneficial insects that were keeping them in check. And now that we're doing integrated pest management, I think in general we're seeing less infestations. Yeah, we still get them, but I've noticed that we haven't had to use as much chemicals as we used to in the past. I used to buy pallets of bug killer, pallets. We still have to spray, and we probably always will, right? Because things get out of balance. Too much rain, right? Whatever. Go to mode of action. So these chemicals kill in all kinds of different ways, and the scientists have figured out, and still are figuring out, how to develop a new one to kill something, right? Some chemicals attack the nerves and the muscles. If they can't move, if they can't use their muscles to move, they're going to die because they can't move, they can't eat, right? So that's one way. So that's a mode of action. That's one way the chemical kills. It could dry them out, desiccate them, right? Somehow it does something to their skin, opens up the pores, I don't know, it depends on the chemical. But what's it do? The sun gets on them, and instead of them staying moist, it dries them out. Dries them out, they die, right? They have some chemicals that regulate growth. So they mimic a hormone in our body that creates sexual reproduction or moves from being a baby to an adult, right? Somewhere in that cycle or that process, it interrupts it. It's a hormone, but it's synthetically made, and they put it in there and they make it stop it. So that's pretty cool. They even have sterilizers where the bug can't produce. So it may get to an adult, but instead of it reproducing and making more offspring, it can't do it because it's sterile. So that's another way the chemical works. And then there's others that a lot of insects breathe through their skin. They don't breathe like us do, or mouse. They breathe through their skin. They respirate through their skin. And so if you use an oil, like a horticultural oil, it'll stop their breathing, so it'll suffocate them. Be almost like someone putting a hand over your mouth or a bag over your head. Okay? Herbicides, right? We use those a lot to kill weeds. What's the biggest chemical we use? Juan? What's the biggest herbicide? What's the one we use the most? Glyphosate. Roundup. Everybody calls it Roundup because it was the first. It's like McDonald's, right? But glyphosate is the active ingredients, and we use it all the time. We use 30 gallons drums of it. So that's the one we use the most. And that's a contact killer, and it's non-selective. That means it kills whatever it touches, basically, right? There's some, as long as they're a broadleaf, there's some plants it won't kill because it's not a broadleaf. You can spray it on it, it's not going to kill it. But most broadleaf, right, grasses, any kind of plants, it's going to work on it. It's non-selective, it's going to kill it. And then we've got systemic. So imidacloprid is a systemic, and it works really, really good. And guess what? They derived it from the coffee plant, right? You put that on, what's it do? It absorbs into the plant. So then when the insect eats the leaves, or starts eating, it poisons itself because it's in the plant. Okay? So systemics are good, but if you have an infestation, you're probably going to have to use a contact to get the population down, and then use a systemic to keep it down afterwards, right? So you've got a population that's too high, right? It's infested. It's causing a problem. Aphids are that way, right? They breed, and next thing you know, in the spring, on viburnum or other plants, you'll see just like, looks like millions sometimes, right? And they're just the population's out of control. You've got to knock it down with a contact and follow it up, usually in the same mixture, with a systemic, so it absorbs into the plant, and then whatever you didn't kill, right? Because you're never going to get 100% kill. That's impossible. It's just forget it. Doesn't work. Okay? Remember, resistance. This is very important. Don't keep using the same chemical over and over and over and over and over. Period. It doesn't matter if it's us with antibiotics or it's in the field. If you keep using the same chemical over and over, what's going to happen is, say there's 1,000 bugs and you get 800 of them. So now there's only 200 left. Well, those 200 that are left are the ones, for whatever reason, genetically are resistant to that chemical. So what do you think's breeding now? The resistant bugs. And so that's what happens. The resistant bugs start breeding, and they're the ones who are resistant to the chemical. So now the next population explosion, that chemical doesn't work as well. So you better change, because a lot of people end up doubling the rate or start going over the label, breaking the law, right? And they go heavier and heavier and heavier and heavier. But eventually that chemical doesn't work at all. And there's many chemicals that have been taken off the market because they're resistant. They don't work at all now. They're done. They never can be used again. So it's very important in your mind, say, okay, I sprayed with this chemical this time, I'm going to move to this one. And you try to choose another one that has a different mode, another way to kill it. So if you chose one that killed by nerve and muscle, right, stopping the nerve and muscles from working, maybe you'd use another mode of action next time. right, so here's a list of the most common insects, most common weeds. You want to go to those pictures? Go ahead and just click on one, and there's an arrow. Click on an arrow here so you can scroll. All right, what's this? Anybody see this one? It's very small. It looks huge on the screen, but that's magnified. Remember, most insects hide underneath the foliage. They don't want to be in the full sun normally, okay? So if you see damage to a plant, or a plant leaf doesn't look right, look underneath. Sometimes they're so small, most of you, I've given you loops, right? Magnifying glass, because I'm telling you, you're talking 1/25 to 1/15 of a size. I mean, it's very, very small. Chinch bugs are tiny, right? These are a little bigger, so you might need a loop, but you got to identify it. Once you identify it, you can choose a chemical that has it on the label, right? Label is the law. It'll give you the list of insects it kills or controls. Okay? That's a thrip. That's a thrip. Everybody should know this. This is one of the most common. This is like bread to a sandwich at Subway. Every spring, when the new growth, right? The new leaves, when it's hot in the spring, they love that juicy leaves that have has a lot of photosynthase, right? Sugar, right? Those young leaves, they're full of energy. These are aphids, okay? And obviously you got an infestation there, so you can't leave that. What do insects do? But just like every other living thing, they eat and go to the bathroom, eat and go to the bathroom, eat and go to the bathroom. They call it honeydew. I don't know why, because it's really shit. Okay? What happens? It's shiny. It looks like oil. What comes next? Anybody ever see any black on their leaves of their plants? That's sooty mold. So the mold eats the crap from the aphids. So you gotta stop the aphids if you want to stop the mold. If you kill the aphids and get rid of them and get their population down, the mold will have nothing to eat. The mold's a huge problem because if you leave it unchecked, the mold blocks photosynthesis. It blankets the leaves. The leaves are the only thing that can make food for itself. Now, we eat food through our mouth, right? But the trees and the plants can only get it from the sun, right? They use the energy of the sun and they make sugar. They do the same thing we do with our food, right? We digest it and that sugar gets into our cells and we make ATP. Anybody ever heard of ATP? ATP is nothing but energy for us. And guess what? It's the same thing for the plants, but they get it from the sun. ATP is one of the most important things for living things on the earth. If you don't have energy, you're not going to live long. Okay? So ATP, that sooty mold blocks that photosynthesis, so it has less food for the plant, and slowly but surely that plant will die. This is Brazilian clover. It's just one of many broadleaves that we have to kill. Go back to that, the next slide. What's this? We're seeing this right now. Brown patch. Dark, damp, cold. Do we got all that right now? Dark, damp, cold, right? Those things promote brown patch fungus. So we have to manage our sprinkler systems, our irrigation. This time of the year, remember this rule of thumb. If it's not growing, it doesn't need water. If it's not growing, it doesn't need water. We just got that rain the other day. That can hold us for 2 weeks probably, right? It's not hot, so the soil's drying out very, very slowly, and it's not growing. If it's not growing, it's not taking up any water, because everything's based on heat, right? Summer, everything grows like crazy. Well, it's taking up the water too. It's going all the way through the plant and releasing it as water vapor through the stomatas and cooling the plant. It's like have you ever been anywhere where they have those water misters at like a bar? Anybody been to a bar where the water's misting out through those little hoses? Never been? Well, the reason why they're doing it is they're spraying water into the air and it's turning into vapor and they're cooling the air. What happens when you sit under a tree? It's several degrees cooler, isn't it? Yeah. Right? During the hot summer, you need a break, what do? Find a tree or find a building, right? Why? Because it's cooler under the tree. Guess what the tree's doing? It's taking that moisture up through it, and on the bottom of the leaves they have little holes called stomatas. It's opening up, that water's coming all the way up through the tree, and it's letting it out as a vapor, like steam almost, right? A vapor, and that water vapor's cooling the area for the tree. It's cooling the tree, right? What happens when we work out or we're exerting ourselves? We perspire. Why do we perspire? Same reason. The water cools us. Same thing, but this is chinch bugs. Go back to the other slide. You see it? It's dead here, and the other slide's dead. How do you know the difference? Well, training, obviously, right? But there's telltale signs. On brown patch, it comes as usually like a collection of circles. See how there's kind of circles here? And on that outer edge, see that edge right there where the green grass is? It'll be like a golden yellow. That's the active edge, and you can see it. It spreads like fire. You get it on the mower, you'll spread it. If you keep watering, you spread it. So you got to do something. And the sooner you get it, the better, because it's not going to stop. And you see that grass right there? It could take all winter to recover. Once you've damaged it to that point, that customer is going to be one unhappy person. So we got to catch this stuff when it's small, when it's a baby, when it's little, right? Don't ever let it get to this, okay? That's why the reports are so important. You've got to give us the reports so we can jump on it. We can tell Donald, hey, we got a fungus started, we need to get spray on it. If we get it when it's little, it's going to minimize the damage. And people understand nothing's perfect, but if you let it get to that, they are not going to be happy. They're paying us money to manage that. Okay? That's chinch bug damage. The only way you're going to know that is you're going to have to look. You got to get down and look. They're very small. See if you can find a chinch bug. Oh, look at that. Okay, so see that ugly thing? That's an adult. There's actually 4 instar stages. There's 4 different ones. Okay? That's what the adult looks like. The small one looks almost like a roach. It's very small. It looks like a baby roach. Yep, it's next slide. See this one? Doesn't that look like a roach? That's the baby. So chinch bugs can all live at the same time. Some things can't, right? Like, you know, metamorphosis for a butterfly, right? Right? It's a worm first, or a caterpillar, right? Eats, and then goes through that chrysalis, right? And then blossoms into a beautiful butterfly most of the time. Some aren't very beautiful, but anyways, you get the idea. So they go through a cycle to get there, but it's only one at a time. They can all live at the same time together. They can all be in there at different stages, and they all eat. And they have a needle-like beak, and they pierce that stolon, right? And what happens where they pierce it? It desiccates, it dries out. And so that's why you see those dead patches. So you gotta look, okay? And they're small, they're only this big, so you might need a loop. The other thing you can do, here's a little trick if you need to, keep a coffee can. Try to get that coffee can to the ground so it has a good seal. Fill it with water and they'll float to the top. That is irritating. Okay, next. Yep. Gotta use dish detergent with it. Okay, that's a sedge. That's another weed, right? See that sedge? We can actually treat for that. We can treat for that. That's not a grassy weed, even though you think it is. It's not. It's a sedge. Sedge we can treat. Broadleafs we can treat. Okay? Grassy weeds we cannot. Okay, go ahead. Okay, that's Florida betony. We see that a lot. We can treat for that. That's Florida pusley. We can treat for that because it has a flower. All right? You see this during the summer. What's that? It's gray leaf spot. This is probably the most common fungus during the summer, by far. Okay? Usually, when we start getting rain in the rainy season, we'll see that naturally. A little bit is okay. I mean, you'll never get rid of it. Okay? Especially if we're getting heavy rains. But you got to watch out for it because it can get out of hand. And there's, see how this gets plenty of green left? If you start seeing too much of this here, you might have to treat for it. Usually we don't have to, but every once in a while, every season's different, right? Every season's different. So we got to just watch out for it. If we start seeing an area not looking too good, and we start seeing the leaves look like that, we might have to spray some fungicide, treat some with some fungicide. All right, what are those? That's another aphid. That's on podocarpus. Those are gray aphids, okay? So aphids are green, aphids are red, aphids are gray. There's many different colors, but they're all aphids. Different species of the same thing. Same thing. Anybody see the black? See the black and the shiny? See how that's shiny? That's sooty mold. Remember that sooty mold I told you? Aphids eating crap, eating crap, eating crap. And then the sooty mold comes in and eats the crap and puts black down and starts blocking photosynthesis, which weakens the plant. There's the grubs. Luckily, we have not seen this problem for a while, and I hope we don't again because it's the most damaging, one of the most, okay? If it's got to that point, we've got a huge problem. You're gonna have to get on it. That's why July, August, and September, we know that's usually when there's a lot of rain and they come up into that root zone, right? See how they're in the just like sod, they're right in that, right at the top. We've got to kill them. What do we use? What do we use for grubs? Dialox. That's one of the #1 we use. We use Dialox. Luckily, we only have to use it once a year, so we don't really have to worry about resistance. But there are a few other chemicals we can go to if need be, but usually we treat with Dialox because it's only one time a year, right? When we water, right, you got to read the chemical, because what do? We need to make sure that we activate that chemical, okay? Because it's on corn cob, usually. So they use a corn cob, ground up corn cob, and they put the chemical on the corn cob. So you spray it, you spread it with a spreader. We need to activate it with water, so we need to make sure before we leave. We don't want to, unless you can trust the customer, usually we do it ourselves though, okay? And the good news is, it's usually a patch. Normally it's not the entire lawn. I've never seen it where it was. They usually congregate in a small area. What you do is, if it's 10 by 10, then go 20 by 20 and make sure you encapsulate it and apply that Dialox. There they are. Ugly. Gross. Okay? Anybody know what this is? Mario, what's this? Scale. Lots of different scales. Soft and hard scales. Scales, when they're baby, crawl around. They find a spot they like, and they sit, and they make like a little shell kind of thing, and they stay the rest of their life there and feed on that spot. And they pierce and suck the juice out of the plant. Scales can be the same problem, sooty mold, because they eat and go to the bathroom. So that's just one. Okay, there's aphids. What's that? It's a beneficial insect. Believe it or not, ladybugs eat the aphids. The problem is, usually aphids, when they breed in huge numbers. And it takes a while for the ladybugs to eat all of those. So you can have problems, and sometimes we can't wait for the ladybugs. Our customers aren't going to allow that. Now, in a perfect world, we just let the ladybugs get them, and they would eventually. But a lot of times we can't, because the customer isn't going to wait. They're not going to want to hear it. So, unfortunately, we end up trying to treat around them. If you see ladybugs, don't spray directly on them if you can help it, because you know that's a beneficial insect. Seen a lot of this. See a lot of this. You got to look up in the air to find it, though, right? Francisco just told me one I got to go look at. This is called lethal bronzing. It is a phytoplasm which you can only see with a microscope, maybe even an electron microscope, maybe not even a light microscope. So it's very small, tiny, tiny, tiny. Right? And what happens is, there's a leafhopper bug, right? And it hops, and it gets on the tree, and it infects it. And the next thing you know, it's killing it. There's no cure. They can't figure out how to stop it. There's no cure. It's called lethal bronzing, and we're seeing it every year. It started in Tampa, actually. And it's spread all over the state now. So when this first came out in the 2000s, you'd maybe see 1 or 2 a year. Now we're seeing 15, 20, 30 trees a year that we got to take down because of this, so it's bad. The good news is, for this one, we can't cause it. Some things we got to make sure that we don't pass it on with our pruning tools, with our saws. Some things you can pass on, but not this one. This one only lives in the tree or in the bug. If the tree's dead, it can't live. So whenever we see this, you need to tell me immediately so I can call the people and give them a price and get permission to take it down, because that right now can infect all these other trees and take them all out. They end up, you could end up killing all the trees. That tree has to come down pronto. It's the only way to do it. So it's important. It's another way we make money too. So, I mean, unfortunately, but we do. So we need to communicate so I can give them a price and we can get it taken down. So that helps them the best we can, and we make a little money on it too. So it's a benefit. This is what I'm talking about. Don't ever let these get this big. Usually grasshoppers are teeny tiny to start. If you see them, don't let them go. Don't let grasshoppers go. That's a lover, right? They get big, right? Everybody's seen those things. When they get big, they eat and go to the bathroom. They can eat everything. They love crinum lilies, right? And if you don't get them, they're going to eat everything down. And then the customer's going to go, what the hell happened here? We got to make sure we're paying attention. Don't go around with blinders on. Check your properties every time you go. If you're Kevin, you're not a supervisor, but if you see something, make sure you tell Francisco. You understand? Everybody can help out here. Okay? Everybody can help out. The whole idea is we're supposed to be professionals. Take pride that we're doing a better job than most companies. You understand? That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to do a better job than all the other companies. That's our goal.
And tell your supervisor before you call or send a picture to Dennis.
Yeah.
Tell your supervisor first when you go past them and send it to Dennis. Please.
Okay, next one. What's that one? Everybody know what that is? Very, very common on hibiscus these days. That is a mealybug. Mealybugs have a waxy coating. You know when you wax your car, how nice and beautiful shiny it is? When you put water on it, what's it do? It beads up, right? That's the whole idea of having wax. It beads up and rolls off the particle, right? Get it. Cohesion gets the particles to grab together, and then it gets too heavy and then it rolls off your car, right? Well, that's what this does. So you gotta be careful when you spray for mealybugs. Make sure you have a sticker. A sticker is basically a surfactant, a soapy substance that makes the chemical stick so it doesn't roll off with water. Okay? Mealybugs pierce and suck. A lot of times when you see hibiscus, they're stunted. They've got this weird small growth. The leaves are only this big, or they're curled, right? That distorted growth. Why? A lot of bugs have a needle-like beak, and they pierce and they suck that chlorophyll, that sugar out of the plant. That's where they're getting their food from, right? They're stealing the food from the plant. The plant's produced it through photosynthesis, and they're eating it. They're stealing it to live. The problem is sometimes they have a virus, right? Or a bacteria on their needle. So when you pierce that leaf, they're giving the plant a virus. The good news is most plants don't die from a virus, but they distort, they yellow, and if you look at hibiscus, you'll start to see no blooms. You'll think, why hasn't that hibiscus got any blooms? If you look close, I'll bet you there's mealybugs. Anybody know this one? That's a mole cricket. That's probably the second most damaging bug. Okay? Mole crickets got, I don't know if you can see it, but they've got kind of like rake-like feet. They got claws. Okay? And so what happens is they start moving and digging and eating, and they tear everything up. So they uproot everything is what they really do. They cause these little, right? If you got a loose area, it could be moles and bowls if they're big, but if they're small tunnels, loose areas, it's most likely mole crickets, and mole crickets tear everything up. They destroy the roots. So you got to get them under control. Years ago, mole crickets were only found in Bahia. All of a sudden, about 20 years ago maybe or so, they started to evolve, right? Because you're seeing less and less Bahia in this area. And so they started all of a sudden out of the blue. They never did it before. They evolved and started eating Floritan. You're like, holy crap, when did this happen? You just all of a sudden started seeing damage in Floritan and you never did before. So things are always changing. Just because it's this way today, even with us, we're evolving, right? You probably don't know this, but there are up to 10,000 mutations in living organisms per day. So you're reproducing your cells, right? It's called mitosis. You're reproducing your cells every day, right? The cells get old, they only last so long, so new cells have to be replaced. And that's true of all other things. And what happens is those mutations cause different species. That's how we got to be where we are. We came from gorillas and chimpanzees, and they've proven it. They know for sure, it's a fact. Okay? They actually have done DNA evidence and so forth, and figured out that we have come from chimpanzees. We're most closely related to chimpanzees. Well, guess what? Everything came from the water. And they think it was just, basically strands of RNA, viruses and bacteria, right? And then algae came on the land, and then it became a moss, and then it evolved. And you see what I'm saying? Everything slowly reproduced and got these new characteristics from mutations. And so this evolved, okay? It wanted to survive through natural selection. So some of those gain a different eating habit to survive, right? Go ahead. We don't see this much anymore, but every once in a while, that's an oleander moth. We call it unidentified red-ass bug, but it's for the oleander, okay? If you see those orange, ugly caterpillars with the black hairs on oleanders, they eat and eat and eat. Look for those, because those are the egg layers right there. You got to get them too, otherwise you could kill all the caterpillars and in a couple of weeks have them back, because that's what they do. They lay eggs. Okay? There it is. We got oleanders, they'll eat them up. Luckily, we haven't seen those. It's been years. We used to see them really bad. They'd be all over the building, and people would lose their mind because they'd have cocoons all over the building, and they go, man, we got bugs all over the place. We'd have to get out there and treat them, but it's not as bad anymore. Here's a broadleaf we see in the spring. It's easily killed, comes up every spring. We'll probably start seeing them soon. This is called oxalis. Kind of looks like clover, but not really, right? It's a little different. It's only got 3 leaves, but it's easily killed. But it comes up every year. So when we start seeing this, the key is what? Get it while it's small. We don't have to use a lot of chemicals. All we got to do is just kind of hit it with a little herbicide and they go away, but don't let them get out of hand. If you let them go to seed, if you let them go to flower, the seeds are going to be all over the place and they'll be everywhere. There we go. There's the mealy bugs on the hibiscus. See how all the leaves are stunted? They're little and they're all crinkled up and distorted. That's the mealy bugs. Okay? Okay? See this a lot on crepe myrtles. This is a fungus. It's called powdery mildew. What happens is it turns the whole leaf gray. You see that a lot. I don't know what this is. I don't know what plant this is, but we see it on crepe myrtles a lot. Usually in the spring, as soon as they start coming back out with their new young leaves, you'll see it. You got to spray it because it'll take them out, right? Same thing like sooty mold. It blocks photosynthesis, and then the plant starts to suffer. Another weed, that's a sedge, nut sedge. Okay, we see this a lot after we landscape, right? After we clean the area, and we put the new plants in and we mulch, we start seeing these come up everywhere. That's because we've agitated the area and sowed those seeds. Anytime you go to pick a weed, what's it do? Releases seeds everywhere. So it's better, believe it or not, to not pick. That's why I'm always telling you guys, spray, 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 spray. Why? If you have to pick, every time you pick it, you're spreading leaves, seeds everywhere. Follow me? You're actually helping the plant try to reproduce. So it's better, believe it or not, to spray so you don't agitate it. Red aphids, right? We had green, we had gray, there's red. Same thing. Ugly little things, huh? Look at it, look at the needle. See the needle-like beak? Put their needle in, suck up that juice. It's like drinking. Okay? Sod webworm damage. Now the good news with sod webworms, a lot of times they come in with new sod. Sometimes you see them just out of the blue. I don't know why. Maybe they come in from a lawnmower or something from new sod. Who knows? Sod webworms are tiny and they curl up in a seed. Make a seed and they hide during the day. They don't like the sun because they're moist. So they hide and they come out at night and they eat the leaves. You'll come and you'll see the grass needs cutting. And all of a sudden you'll hit an area and it doesn't need cutting. You're like, what's going on here? And that's your first sign. Sod webworms are probably there because they mowed the grass for you. The good news is they're easily killed. Bifenthrin usually takes them right out. You don't have to do much, okay? Because they've got a very wet, soft body. That chemical usually kills them pretty quickly. There it is. It looks bigger than it is. It's less than an inch, usually 3/4 of an inch, maybe an inch at most. See what it does though? It eats. It eats and goes to the bathroom. It eats and goes to the bathroom. That's what it does. It's an eating machine. There's the damage. See all the holes? See that? It's eating. It's chewing. See all that chew mark? That's what it does. But it looks like the grass was cut. Until you get up on it, you're like, holy crap, it's all chewed up. Sod webworms. Right. That's a soft scale. Remember we told you that scales are born I don't know if this soft scale moves or not, I forget, but I think it attaches and stays in the same spot, but it looks like it's got legs, doesn't it? But anyways, it's soft. But same thing, pierces and sucks. So they either eat or they pierce and suck. They either got a needle-like beak or they're chewing. One of the two. They're getting food. There's the sooty mold we're trying to avoid. You got to look for the insect. And in this case, you can see it's green scale. Okay? Once you stop that sooty mold, the insects, the mold will stop growing, but the problem is you might have to use like pressurized water with a hose and try to wash it off. It'll delaminate, it'll be dry, and you can wipe it off. You can see where it's flaking off. Okay? See how it's flaking? You take a hose and kind of power wash it a little bit. This is spurge. It's another broadleaf weed. I can tell you, normally when I see spurge, Zach. Normally when I see spurge, I've noticed, this is just me, and I could be wrong, I've seen chinch bugs in the area. So I don't know if there's a correlation or not, it could just be in my head, but anytime I see turf where it's damaged and I see spurge, I start looking for chinch bugs, and 99% of the time there's chinch bugs there. Maybe it's just that the chinch bugs have killed the area and made it susceptible for spurge to sow. Could be just that, but I've seen the two together. I don't know if that matters or not. Okay, that's that Sri Lankan weevil I was talking about. It has 100 different species, and that eats. Okay, see that thing? It's gray with black spots. It's called a Sri Lankan weevil, and it came in with food products from South America, I believe. Started in Brevard County. They had a note in the system, and then slowly but surely spread over the years all over. And it's here now. And I didn't know what it was because I didn't ever see it before. Yeah, they eat a lot of stuff. Over 100 species they eat. That's not normally the case. Normally, like mealybugs, like a couple things, you know? They don't go crazy and eat anything. Well, these things like everything.
My dog.
That's what they do. So you can't miss it. You got to investigate. That's normally what it's going to be. If you see how they do a lot of damage. And you'll see it on Indian hawthorn a lot. Okay, that's thrip damage. Remember that first slide, that long one I saw, the thrip? I don't know if you can see this, but it almost looks like snow. Well, that's what's happening, is it's piercing and sucking, and it's exploding the cells and turning it white on top. So if you see that kind of snowy look, you know there's an animal piercing and sucking from underneath. And in this case, it's thrips. They have another one called chili thrips, which has a different, similar, but it's a different species. The limbs are a little smaller. Okay? Thrips, that's how big they are. Remember I showed you this picture? It looked like it was big. That's how small they are. But it's a thrip. They're long. They almost look like a rice grain. See that? Okay, this one. Lantana. You'll see a lot on lantana. I can't think of anything else, but if you were to just hit lantana, they'll fly all around. You can't miss them. They're called white fly. You got to get them though. White fly will do the same thing as those chili thrips. They'll make everything white like snow. The leaves will all be stipple white. Okay? That's the underside. Now, here's a weird bug. This is actually an aphid, but it kind of looks like a mealybug. And I can't tell you over the years how many times I've been tricked until I get a loop out. Because from afar, with not good eyesight, because my eyesight isn't as good as it used to be, they look like mealybugs to me. But when you get really down into it and really look close, it's called a woolly aphid. And you'll see these on Robelinis. We had a customer, I don't know if we still do because she hasn't called in a while, but 5 Towns, they had those all over their Robelinis. Okay, that's another weed. That's a wild geranium. You're going to see all these in the spring. Okay? You're starting to see them already, actually. I saw yellow wood sorrel at my house. So you're starting to see them already. But that cold kind of, sometimes when these cold spells come in, it kind of messes up plants because it's hot before that and they think it's time to bring their leaves out early at spring, but it's not. But you're going to see a lot of this during the spring, and they're easily killed, but you've got to get some herbicide on them, or at least tell Donald so we can get there before it gets out of hand. There's another sedge. Okay, we can kill those. There's the yellow wood sorrel. Saw that at my house yesterday, actually. Okay, is that it? All right, so let's go back to the slide. All right, so go down. So we went through all those. Stop right there. You know dollar weed, okay? Dollar weed's perennial. You can see it year after year, and it loves water.
They might get the dichondra weeds confused with dollar weed. Dichondra weeds is no fructose.
Yeah.
So they see a lot of dichondra weed, they think it's dollar weed, so it's not dollar weed.
Yeah. Dollar weed is shiny and darker green. It's got kind of a waxy coating. Dichondra is kind of a not quite as round, right? Yeah, there's a little slit in it. But anyways, luckily we don't have a lot of dichondra, but every once in a while you'll see it. But anyways, here's the common ones. Dollar weed, that spurge I showed you where I thought maybe it was kind of linked a little bit to chinch bugs. You got that Jack Carolina geranium, you got the yellow wood sorrel, you got the Florida pusley, all these, and then you got your sedges. Now the grassy weeds, the carpet grass, the wild Bermuda, the crabgrass, and the sand spurs, we can't kill. If we have a freeze, and it kills them, then we could put a pre-emergent down, but we don't have it included in our regular program because it's very expensive and most people aren't going to pay for it. And we hardly ever get freezes. Like down on the beach, the swim club, the lady complaining about the sand spurs, but the fact of the matter is they're never going to get a freeze down there, and you're never getting rid of them. If they're alive and they're already there, you can't put pre-emergent down to stop them. They have to be completely dead. Then you can put the pre-emergent down to stop the seeds. The pre-emergent kind of puts a barrier down on the ground. So then when the seed goes to sow and it's a baby, it hits that barrier with the herbicide and gets some of that herbicide on it and kills it. because it's a baby. It's just started to grow. Right? So we went over the two most famous popular funguses: brown patch in the winter, gray leaf spot in the summer. This year we did have take-all and large patch. Very rare though, we don't see it that often. But we think we saw it at Ahuja, and we think we saw it at Village on the Island because of the way the roots looked. If they're really black, everything kind of turns black, almost like a rot, it looks like take-off. But we rarely see it over here. There they are. Okay, so I don't know how much we have left, but we'll keep going. We got to make sure we get 2 hours in. Anything after that? So the application rates. We do everything on 1,000 square feet. Okay? So you got to know how much you're treating. Okay? 1,000 square feet. Okay? 100 by 10. Right? Whatever. So if you're going to apply fertilizer, if you're going to apply herbicide, you got to have an idea of the rate you're putting down. One of the ways they can get you, they probably won't. It's probably going to not happen. But one of the ways they could get you is if you over-treat it. Because each chemical, there's only so much you're allowed to apply per year. The maximum amount. So if you over-treat by not measuring the chemical and putting too much down, they could technically take samples of the area you treated and do chemical analysis and say, there's this concentration per whatever, and you over-treated. They could technically get you. Will they? Probably not, because those tests cost a lot of money. You know how they're going to get you? Someone's going to have to complain. As long as we're responsible and professional and trying to do the right thing, I think you're going to find out you're not going to have any problems. The problem comes in when you're negligent and obvious, doing things that you shouldn't be doing. Okay? But just obey the law. Try to figure out on the label, and if you need my help, Donald's help, or Nick's help, we can help you on that. Donald has a state certification, I have a state certification, and Nick's family was in the pest business, sold chemicals and did it professionally too for 30, 40 years. His dad worked on a golf course. I've known their family forever. So believe me, if you need help at all and you can't figure something out, just call. Okay, irrigation. Go ahead to that PDF real quick. So a lot of companies do things by the seat of their pants. Doesn't make any sense to me. Scientists have already figured out what each nozzle will emit as far as water. How much water will come out of an 8 full, an 8 half, an 8 cube, and they got a table. This is scientific data that will help us, tell us to manage properly, not guess. And yet, I see companies all the time coming out, putting systems in without designing them, and by the seat of their pants, they have no idea what they're doing. And it irritates me. We aspire to be professionals, and so we use science whenever we can to help us. And all the time, they're coming up with new stuff. So if you're on the cutting edge and trying to be a professional, you need to continually learn like we're doing now. All right, so a perfect example, a 10, where's the 10s? Go up. Okay, so I design a lot with 10s because 10s are very efficient. You have to use a few more heads, but you get a good coverage. And the whole idea is to cover the area, right? Put a good even blanket of water down, whatever you're doing, and manage how long that's going on. You're trying to water the first 10 inches to 12 inches of the soil max. That's where all the nutrient-bearing roots are of plants. Anything less than that, you're not watering enough. Anything more than that, you're just wasting water. Okay? So we're trying to manage that. Now, here's a perfect example. So I use this pattern. That's the most efficient pattern. A delta pattern or a triangular spaced pattern. This is another pattern people use all the time. Sometimes you have to use this because you can't use a triangular pattern, but this is not as efficient as this pattern. So you go down here and it'll tell you inches, because we, you know, if you were using meters, metric, you would come over here, but it'll tell you exactly how many inches per hour at 30 psi. Because look, we're trying to get, can everybody see? This is supposed to be a 10 half head. Well, the only one that covers 10 feet is 30 psi, so that's what we're trying to get to, right? So if we're going to do a design, we're trying to get that system to work at 30 psi. And when we design that system, if we can get it to 30 psi, we know a 10 half head will cover that area. So now I'll go back to that. So people ask me all the time, well, how do you know what to water? Well, it's pretty easy. You do a inventory of what the heads are in the field, right? Now, like when we did Florida Avenue Restaurant, I designed that, so I know what's there. And so I can use that to hone in on how long that zone is supposed to be on, okay? Now, here's a rule of thumb, okay? This is just a rule of thumb. If you got a stationary head, a pop-up head, right? Or a bed head, and it's spraying the whole area the whole time it's on. If it's in the shade, about 20 minutes. If it's in the sun, 30 minutes. Now that's just a pocket rule of thumb. That'll get you close. If you want to be more efficient, you got to start figuring out other stuff. Okay? Now, rotor zones, same thing. Rotor zones, they're moving the whole time. So you've got to have them on longer because they're not covering the entire area the whole time. Where a spray head's spraying the whole area all the time. The rotor head is not. So the rotor head in shade needs to be on 45 minutes, 60 in full sun, give or take. This is just a pocket rule of thumb. It's not exact, okay? Scroll up. So there's other things you got to figure out though, okay? What kind of soil is it, right? If we're on the beach, if we're on Clearwater Beach, most of the soil's sandy soil. So what happens in sandy soil? The water's going right through. It's going to percolate and infiltrate and percolate through that soil quickly. So we probably are going to have to water a little less more often. Same thing with fertilizers in sandy soil, right? Sandy soil has no nutrients at all. The cation exchange, they call it. That's the ability of the soil to hold nutrients, okay? So sandy soil, there's no cation exchange. You can't hold nutrients, so it's void of nutrients. In those situations, we're probably going to have to fertilize less, but more often. You follow me? Why? Because it's going to lose the water quickly. It's going to lose those nutrients quickly. You follow me? Because it can't hold it. It has no ability to hold it. You see what I'm saying? So we need to consider what type of soil is it. Okay? How fast it's moving into the soil. how fast it's percolating in through the soil. East Lake Woodlands area, Pinnacle, right? Feather Sound, a lot of clay in the soil there. So what happens? Everybody know what clay is? Clay is just very, 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 very small particles. All right? You start with a rock, and then you get erosion, right? It erodes down till you get sand on a beach. Well, those particles are so soft, they actually measure them through a sieve, and they can have different size particles where it's eroded down to tiny little sand. Well, clay is even eroded smaller than that. So small that it acts like cement. Okay? Where it percolates so, infiltrate and percolates so slowly, if we get heavy rains, what happens? It floods, it sits. And that's bad, right? Well, we got to know that. Okay? If we know we're in an area that's got a lot of clay and the water stands and sits, and we need to make sure we shut that water off and let it dry out. And then only turn it back on after it's dried out a little bit. So we really have to pay attention during the summer and adjust our sprinkler systems accordingly, right? If it's sandy soil, we might not ever turn it off. We may only water once a week, right? But if we got a clay soil, if we had an adjustment on the timer, we may only want to water every 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Depends. You might just have to turn it off and then say, okay, it's getting a little dry now, I want to turn it back on. And if you do that and you manage it, you're avoiding problems. You can't do anything about Mother Nature. It's going to rain if it rains. Okay? We can't do anything about that. It's going to be hot if it's going to be hot. It's going to be cold. We can't do anything about those things. We only can act, right? React. But we can be smart and adjust that system, turn it off, advance it, do whatever we need to do to adjust for the water. And if we do that, we're managing the irrigation. Okay? That's what a professional does. We manage the irrigation, we manage the fertility, we manage the soil, we manage pests. Follow me? If we manage these things, we'll have good plant health care. Like I said, if it rains, turn it off. Now, fertilizer. The law, we're only allowed to put 1 pound nitrogen per 1,000, and it has to be 50% slow release. Now the good news is we already buy that. It's 50% slow release. It's coated with sulfur. So we don't buy anything that's left. They can't even sell it. So we don't have to worry about that. But if we buy 1648, where are you? Go up a little bit. Okay, I guess it's not there.
Right there.
Where? Oh, there it is. Okay. All right. So if we got 1648, that's 16% nitrogen, 4% phosphorus, and 8% potash or potassium, right? Now we can't use that because why? That's banned now. We're not allowed to use it. That's why we have 24011, right? We're only allowed to use phosphorus if we do a soil test. And the soil test has to tell us that we're low in it. If we get a soil test and they pay for it, like we had Sereno do it, and Trafalgar paid for one, and they're going to probably pay for another one, right? They just had it, they just paid for a second one. And we get that information. It'd be nice if all our customers did that because we'd be able to customize their their fertilizer applications better, okay? A lot of people don't want to pay for it though. Is it needed? Well, it gives us more information because at Sereno, the pH was so high. Go down. We'll go back to that. Keep going. Okay, see this scale? Everybody heard of pH, right? It's how acidic, how much acid there is, or how much alkaline there's in the soil. Look what happens as you move this way and it becomes more alkaline. See this? Less and less nitrogen can be uptaken. Right here, there's a little glut with phosphorus. And then look what happens to iron and manganese and boron and copper. So at Sereno, we put fertilizer down and we couldn't get anything to green up. We're like, what is going on, man? No matter what we do, we can't get that grass to green up. So we took a soil sample. Donna went out there, took some soil, brought it to Site 1, and they came back and said that the pH was way up here. Well, then we started to realize why. When the pH goes up or it goes too far down, it's a different form of the element, and it can't take, the plant can't take it up because it's in a different form. Okay? So where's the sweet spot? Right here to about right there. Yeah, 6.3-ish. See that? To no more than, say, 7.5 in that area. So that's important. So if you have a problem, right, we can take a soil sample. Go ahead and go back up. That'll give us more information. Okay? So that cation exchange rate, right? That's how well the soil holds the nutrients and makes them available to the plant. We want a high cation exchange rate. Soils with sandy soil, or what they call xeric soil, sandy soil, you ever heard of xeriscape mean? Xeric means not a lot, right? That xeric soil is all sandy. Well, you know 401, you guys been, some of you guys been to my house at 401 there, remember 401? That area was so sandy, man, it wouldn't hold any nutrients at all. Okay? You're gonna see the water drain more rapidly, so you're gonna have to water more often. You're gonna see drought stress is more common during times when it doesn't rain, because it doesn't hold any moisture, so it's going to dry out quicker. It has a low nutrient exchange capacity. It's more difficult for the plants to uptake the nutrients. You're probably going to fertilize less per application, but have to do it more often because it's going to go through the soil. Yeah. Helps. You hear that? So if you got sandy soil, you can add a surfactant. He said it'll help. And water less per event, but more often. Same thing. That water is going to gravitate right. It's going to go right to the soil. So most of the soil is mixed. It's called masic soil. It's mixed. It drains more slowly. It has a good mixture. of sand, silt, clay, and maybe even some organics. Now, in this area, what happens in the forest? When leaves drop, nobody rakes them away. So we have an organic layer. Guess what? That's where all the animals live. That's where all the worms and microarthropods, bacteria, fungus, because they're breaking down that organic matter. They all live in that litter layer, they call it, right? What do we do here in suburban Tampa Bay? What do? We clean it all up. We take all the leaves, we take all the garbage, because nobody wants to see it. They want everything clean. So we're wiping out the organic layer, which is the most where the most active living things are in the soil. So what do? We mulch. If we mulch the beds, it's a benefit. What's mulch do? Eventually the wood will break down. We have what they call nutrient cycling, and eventually it becomes food for the plant again. That's number one, right? Because those elements, organics, break down and eventually go inorganic, okay? What else does it do? Moderates the bed temperature. If you had a chance to put down mulch or rock, which one would you put down? If the customer didn't care, which one would you recommend? Mario? Mulch. Every time. What's rock do? Heats the bed up, works into the soil, makes it more difficult for the roots to grow, right? Doesn't hold any moisture, compacts the soil. Worms and microarthropods, bacteria, fungus, they actually aerate the soil. You know, when we put flowers in, we put that white perlite. Why do we do that? We put the perlite down to make the soil less compacted and keep it fluffy, so it's easy for the roots to grow, right? Well, that's the same thing with the litter layer. The organic layer is very important, and yet we rake it away, throw it away. How many bags of garbage do we get a day of leaves? Okay. The higher the clay in the soil, you'll see that a lot near water, right? Usually soils that are in tidal flow areas, wetland areas, are high in nutrients because they have a lot of clay and a lot of organics, okay? The only problem is what happens with clay soil. It becomes anaerobic when it rains heavy, right? The water stands in the soil, the plant can't get rid of it can't respirate properly. Respiration, it gets rid of gases, believe it or not, and it uptakes oxygen, and it uptakes water and nutrients. Well, it's more difficult for that plant to get rid of them if it's standing in water, so then it goes to what they call anaerobic fermentation. And what's that mean, fermentation? Rots. Fermentate is rotting. So the roots rot. So the longer that water stands on those roots, there's no oxygen, they'll turn brown and then black. And kill the roots, you kill the plant. Here's the perfect mixture. A little bit. The perfect mixture, they say, is loam. So you need 50% pore space, micro and macro pores. So what happens is the holes, the pore, the space in the soil is important because that's where oxygen and water flow. So after a rain, the water flows from gravity through the soil, right? So once it goes through, the gravity pulls the bulk of the moisture away. What's left in the micropores is held into the soil, is what the plant can get. Okay? 5% organic material, right? That helps cation and full of nutrients, and then helps provide a place for living animals and insects and so forth, right? Fungus, bacteria, microarthropods, nematodes, all that good stuff. And then the rest of the soil, about 40% sand, 40% silt, and 20% clay, and that's like what they call a perfect soil. Loam. Anybody ever heard loam? Loam? Oh, you got good loam. I remember my grandfather saying that. You got good loam. You got good loam here. That means the soil's good. That's the perfect ingredients. That's where things grow and percolate, hold just the right amount of water, have just the right amount of oxygen. It's a good environment for living things. Okay? Go past that. So things to look for, that's a healthy, those are healthy leaves, right? This one's slightly chlorotic. That means it's not producing chlorophyll. It's not producing as much food, photosynthase, sugar, right? All comes down to complex carbohydrates, glucose. It's all sugar. Same thing with us, sugar, ATP. So this is ideal, a little less ideal, all the way to severe, right? You know there's a problem. It's not producing food for itself. If you see this, we got a problem. We either got some kind of insect, some kind of fungus, some kind of bacteria, some kind of virus, some kind of nematode, or some type of root problem. Okay, something is, that plant is not happy. And we need to figure it out, because really, if we start getting to here, if we don't figure it out soon, we get to here, it may not ever be over. It's probably gone. You know what I mean? It's got a death spiral. Once it gets to this point, it's probably too late. Sometimes they can recover, but it's much harder, right? Because they're very sick. See this on the fronds, right? When you see it crinkle up like this, see the leaves, see the petioles, or the leaflets, excuse me. When they're curled up like that, that's a deficiency. You probably won't have to deal with that, but you need to take a picture and say, hey, there's something wrong with this palm. Take a picture, we'll show Donald. Donald will come and put some fertilizer on it, most likely, right? Because it's a manganese deficiency. Probably what happens a lot in the summer, it rains so much, it washes the nutrients right out of the soil. We see it a lot. Boron, that's another one. Magnesium, okay? This is a common problem. This is magnesium. I don't know if it says manganese here, but this is common on canaries. You'll see these older fronds turn yellow, and normally it's magnesium. Huh? Yeah. Yeah. All right, so we're getting there. We're almost done. All right, so let's just talk about pruning. Look, this is a pest class. but we don't want to cause any problems. So these other management systems, maintenance management, fertility management, irrigation management, soil management, pest management. If we're intelligent on these other things, we can stop problems with pests. We still are going to have pests, but we don't want to cause the problem by not managing the irrigation, by not pruning correctly, because we can cause stresses. All these cause stresses. We want to reduce stress. If we can reduce the stress to the plant and keep it happy, we'll see less of all these problems, okay? That's what this is all about. Plant health care, holistic approach. See this right here? See that little scar? It almost looks like a scar, but it's not. It's called the branch bark ridge. That's very important. Here's the trunk, here's the branch. We want to retain that ridge. What happens is every year that plant gets radial growth or girth, right? It'll grow axially on the ends, right? It's growing up and out, but it also gets thicker, right? Every year the branches get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Well, what happens is this lays down a new layer of wood, and then the trunk lays down a layer of wood, and where these two meet, pushes it up. And you can actually see it, especially in live oaks. If you were to go look at those oaks, you can see that as clear as day. Now, here's the other thing. See this thick section right here? See how it's thicker where it connects? That's called the collar. That's very important. In this area right here, there's special chemical and physical properties that protect that tree. If that limb is ever damaged at that union, or if someone takes it off, or a storm breaks it off, it has special chemicals to protect it from coming into here, into the parent, right? So it's very important to leave the collar and leave the branch bark ridge. So see where we're cutting that? Now, why wouldn't we cut it here? It's more straight up and down. Because the branch is at this angle. We don't want to make that hole, that wound, any bigger than it is round. So if we had it at a different angle, it would make it bigger. We're going to have a bigger wound. So what we're doing is we're trying to match across the same way the branch is going to make it as small as possible. Get outside of this at least an inch or two and retain that collar where all those special chemical and physical properties are to protect the tree from damage. Okay? A little more. This is like, I think, the last slider almost. Now, see this? That's before pruning. Everybody wants their palms trimmed. If they only knew that if it's still green, you shouldn't take it. Why? It's the only way it can eat. If we named our trees Spot or some other name, what's your dog? You got a dog or a cat?
Wiley.
Wiley? Okay, my dog's Chase. If I named a tree Chase, maybe we'd care for it better.
Yeah.
See what I'm saying? For whatever reason, we never cared about animals in the past, right? They were just means to an end. And all of a sudden, we've got funerals and vets and $1,000 bills. We're spending all this money on our dogs, and we care for them as part of the family, and yet we'll abuse the tree in the yard. It's sad, actually, if you think about it. It's another living thing, and what we're trying to do is we're being paid as professionals to care for this stuff. So we don't want to rape the tree and cause harm. That's way over trimming, okay? That's called hurricane cutting. You have taken all the food away from that plant. Now, how is it going to eat? Where's it getting its energy from? So you've added stress to that thing. Will it recover? Sometimes they do. In fact, living things are very resilient. Okay? Palms are very resilient. A lot of times they'll come right back. And you'll go, oh, see, it can be nothing. I cut crepe myrtles for 25 years. Yeah, but they did research and they found out it doesn't help it, it hurts it. Why are we still doing it? They've got scientific research proving that pruning crepe myrtles back every year hurts them. It doesn't help. Why are we doing it still? Stupid. Think of how many things in life you go, what in the hell? Right? Makes no sense. We know the truth, we know the right way, and we still do it the wrong way. If we have to trim, we want to stay 9 o'clock and 3 o'clock, okay? If we have to trim. We want to leave some food so it can eat. We don't want to do this. And we tell the customers, I'm sorry, that's against the law. You can call my boss, but we're not doing that. You don't have to be nasty, you don't have to be rude, but we are not doing that, okay? I added this section, it's not even on your sheets, and then we'll finish up. We've never talked about this before, but I think we should. What happens if someone gets hurt on the job? What's the first thing you do?
Well, if they're really hurt, 911, and then call you.
If it's an emergency, a true emergency, where someone has really hurt themselves, call 911 and immediately try to help that person. If he's in a tree, you try to rescue him without hurting yourself. If he's puking or something like that, right? Maybe he's been, I just started on this, I didn't get the whole section done. One of these things, a perfect example is Doug had a helper, I forget the guy's name.
Alejandro.
Oh, yeah.
And when he's putting mulch down, all of a sudden, Doug's shoveling the mulch for him, and he's putting it down. He looks and he's nowhere around. He's like, what's going on? He went to find him, and he's laying on the ground. He got heat exhaustion, right? So what's the first thing you do, right? If he's unconscious, you gotta call 911, check if he's breathing, right? Has everybody learned CPR? You guys know how to do that? You know how to find the here and here in the middle of the heart, right? And you always see on the TV, 1, 2, 3, right? So you try to do it like you would do a breath.
Oh, it's new now that they got new.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, Nick was saying that you don't even do breaths anymore. You just do compressions. You just do hand compressions. The way I was taught is you do 2 breaths, use your finger. Now, I think you still should do that. Here's why. You got to make sure that he's got an airway. What if he was eating something and he got something caught? The only way you're going to really know is unless he's like heat exhaustion. A lot of times you'll see someone sweating, right? There's signs. But if you can't see him breathing, you need to make sure he's breathing. That's number 1, because he isn't going to last long, or she, if they're not breathing.
No quits in our field.
It was nice to work with you.
Okay? Obviously get 911 on the way. Okay? But sometimes it's not quite that bad. Like Nick was working the other day, he's like, man, I really don't feel good, man. I'm not feeling good. And it wasn't even a hot day. It may have been just something he ate, but what we think was he ended up getting a cold or something. Okay? Even though, okay, you don't know if that person's bullshitting you or not. Okay? I've had plenty who you knew and I knew, everybody knew that that wasn't really the truth. You can't take the risk, okay? You can't hurt your people. You gotta err on the side of caution every time. You gotta take him at his word, even if it's a lie and you know it's a lie, or you strongly think it's a lie. You've gotta treat it as it's a problem. You understand? And take the prop. You gotta let him, get him out of the sun. If he's not puking, get him a drink and let him relax, but you need to keep an eye on that person, okay? Don't let him do something that can hurt himself. And that's including when you're doing trimming, okay? Don't let them do something that you know they're gonna get hurt. Stop them, okay? Make sure they're not running a weed eater without glasses. Most likely should have ear protection on most of the time. There's a law basically says an average, weighted average of 85 decibels, but I can tell you most of that loud weed eaters, edgers, blowers, you probably should have earplugs in to protect your hearing, okay? So that said, just know that you need to call 911 if it's bad, okay? If they're just not feeling good, get them out of the sun and keep an eye on them. And if they start going downhill, then you either got to stop what you're doing, take them to the hospital, or call 911, okay? We don't want anybody to get hurt. All right. That's good. That's it. We're done.
Everybody freeze.